welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. It is the return of the Three Musketeers. I am joined by Helen Manahan and Pete Dunn, my friends. We all used to work together at BPA Quality. There is an actual subject matter to this, but do forgive us if we just
Spiral.
if we just wander around the inner workings of our brains and our shared experiences and connection, because I love these two humans dearly, very well respected in the industry. But we are here to talk about consumer duty, which, thanks to Pete and Helen, they reminded me it's coming up to about a year since this has been unleashed. And we're here to talk about what they've seen, what it means, and to share tips and talk, maybe comment on how people are implementing it. It feels like it's been less than a year, but I guess if
Not.
Helen, no, I was going to say, starting with you, who have been immersed in helping your clients and talking about this and what it
Mm.
means for important things like vulnerability. Has it had the change that you expected when you first sort of read about it and knew it was coming?
It's really interesting the way that you position that. About a year, and I'm thinking, goodness, anyone in the financial industry will know exactly the day it came into effect. Firstly last year, and now for closed book products at the end of July this year. It feels like that indelible mark, a bit like when GDPR came into effect. Back in, was it 2018? I think, we all had that deadline kind of in our minds, and now we're past it. It's just the start of the journey, I think. So yeah, it certainly was a step change, from a kind of narrow compliance driven view to a very customer centric focus on good outcomes. Also recognizing really diverse customer needs and how we can meet them at every stage of that consumer, that customer life cycle, and journey with our firms. Just the idea of putting ourselves in our customers' shoes. So, of course, that should not be new news, and it shouldn't have been new news in July 2023 or even in 2022. But it's great for the kind of the good word of BPA. That's what we've been saying for a very long time, that customer centricity is paramount. And so it's great that we have a whole industry with a regulator that is, taking this idea of looking at customer journeys and outcomes from a more holistic place. Well, maybe the 500 feet view, but also maybe the kind of, just a couple of inches off the ground view as well. And asking ourselves, would we be happy to be treated in the way that our firm is treating our customers? So I don't know if I've answered your question there, but yeah, lots has happened, and broadly, although difficult to implement, I think it's all been for the good of the industry and certainly for customers.
I would love to, we'll come to that view of the move from the regulator from compliance to really thinking about customer experience, customer journey, like you say, that kind of holistic outlook as opposed to quite binary, I guess. But you mentioned the phrase there, closed book. What does that mean?
So those are products that are no longer, out there for customers to choose, but are still there for the previously existing customers. So ultimately, any products that are no longer live in the market, I hope I've explained that sufficiently. So it's basically now just bringing all of it. I think the FCA made it clear that they wanted to give firms the time to bring everything on board and to do all of the necessary steps, of which there are many, to make sure that first we're looking at products that are open on the market at the moment, and then look at these closed book kind of historical legacy products.
That's interesting. Pete, have you seen then that companies have just gone, do you know what? It doesn't matter whether it's for our existing customers and products that might be no longer being offered to new customers, or have they compartmentalized their approach? Have they done it? Have they gone, you know what? There's some really good stuff here. We're going to apply it to everyone, or they've kind of broken it down?
Bit of both, and some other approaches essentially. To pick up a point that Helen made there from the FCA's perspective and the people under their purview, right? So insurances, fintech, financial services, etc. the view on this was, even a year, year and a half, 2 years before it went live, where they've been far more explicit than they ever have been before in terms of what it actually means, as opposed to, is it yes, is it no, is it about balancing risk? And I think a lot of companies have, if they've, to my mind, my opinion, done well with it, they've gone with that more narrative approach, and they've kind of gone, actually, this isn't about the products per se, it's about how we interact with our customers to make it easy to understand what products we have, and now with this expansion, what products we used to have but might still be live in terms of being paid for by customers, even if they can't, sell it new. And some companies at the other end of that spectrum have almost kind of, I think, been quite reactive, looked at it from quite a product-led lens and gone, this tranche of products, we're going to do this with, this tranche of products we'll do this with. That's not to say those two different approaches at the kind of far end of the spectrum of one's good, one's bad, but I would say the more complete and more effective approach we've seen is less about product, more about service and servicing your customers, just being better at servicing your customers, which in many respects with this latest expansion should mean that it should in effect get easier, I think, to look after those customers, because instead of having two potential approaches, we've seen a couple of our clients especially who kind of just gone, we just need to take a better approach at this. And from the get-go, they were almost talking about everything they did. So this should now, for those companies who didn't quite do that, it should just almost kind of remove any differences of approach, which of course, more juice for the squeeze in terms of how you approach your customer contact.
Can I ask what might be a contentious question? If this was outcomes based and really considering all groups of customers, how they interact with your service, how you portray it, and the ease with which people can navigate through their interaction with you, shouldn't they have been doing that anyway? And have you seen some that are kind of the more, let's say, progressive companies have found it easier to adapt to being under this new regulation, or has it raised the standard? And I guess that could be yes to both, could it?
I think that idea about, has it raised the standard? It's probably a bit too early really to take a view on, what the impact is at this point. I mean, it's kind of the time to look at how things are coming along. I mean, we've had those first board reports, and I know the FCA just expressed a bit of disappointment that there was a lot of data, a lot of what, but not really that much of the so what and the now what. That's my language, not theirs, So not a great deal in some cases of analysis and kind of recommendations about the findings. So gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but Pete, do you want to jump in and rescue me because I'm floundering?
That's interesting.
That's interesting though. So the FCA have already communicated their kind of view on how well it's been undertaken. Is that right?
Yeah, they gave a view on that in their recent. I mean, Sheldon Mills gave a webinar. I can't remember the time now. It's all blurring into one, but 1 year on, I think it was last week, and made that point that overall they're pleased to see the progress, and they do reference that it is a journey. That's his language. It's a journey. So it is really an opportunity to take stock, but not to. They never want the consumer duty to be viewed as a one and done. It's not a tick, that meme.
We've done
consumer duty completed it, mate. It's never going to be that, or it certainly shouldn't be. And we know that with anything that's truly customer centric, customer needs evolve. The landscape that we're all living in evolves. If you know our kind of thought work in any way, we talk a lot about the poly crisis, the perma crisis, this kind of backdrop of all of the kind of vagaries that life is throwing at all of us on the regular, as it were, and what that means for our contacts and our expectations and our hopes when we come into contact with an organization. And those moments of truth that then come about when we finally experience just how well the firm or the organization can meet us where we are in our moment of need.
Yeah, to pick up on that, how or not, in case of how well they can meet us.
Yeah, good point.
So yeah, I really like that point there from Helen around, it's not one and done. It's absolutely opposite of that, right? It's that continuing approach to better customer experience. But we know there's this wider backdrop, right, within this perma crisis, that customer experience expectations and delivery have probably never been further apart.
Yeah.
And this is a year-on-year trend that continues to push in that direction. The FCA came out with some really kind of positive updates from their first year, but your question around have they already spoken on it? Yes, that I think as well. They've been more vocal about firms that they've kind of summoned, as said, right, we need to have a chat with you. We think there's a problem there. They've been a lot more vocal around how they're supporting and different ways that they're interfacing with the industry when we're seeing lots of new challenges as well. So in much the same way that we saw the ambulance chasing of PPI, now we've got the commissions issues and we've got the emissions issues. Couldn't say that again, I tried. And so there's a lot going on in the FCA space where I think they're actually being a lot more approachable as a regulator, understanding that actually they're asking for a lot.
Yeah.
That being said, there's a lot going on full stop with AI and various other bits and pieces, which we can dig into a bit more. But there's also research out there that says, especially for vulnerable customers, that some of the largest kind of brands within this space have taken approaches that at first glance would seem quite robust and following what the FCA is saying, but their customers in turn are going, it's more difficult than ever to talk to a person. It's more difficult than ever as a vulnerable customer to interact with these services. So all of these steps that have maybe been taken on my behalf as a vulnerable customer have actually reduced my capacity to interact with this company, especially for the digitally illiterate and such, that trying to push everyone into a channel containment pattern with AI and chatbots is not the thing, necessarily the thing that works the best. So it's going to continue, I think, over the next few weeks and months to really kind of, we're going to see, as always, lots of data, lots of insight, lots of commentary on what is actually happening and what does this actually mean, the so what, to Helen's point about how is it impacting customers.
I think it's really good, isn't it, that the FCA are clearly, they want to help people improve. They're not just going to be there as a kind of punitive wrist slapper and kind of fine collector. I think, they are making efforts to simplify things. They've had feedback as they called out that the rules are very complex, which clearly they are, but they're, kind of inviting voices into that. So and I heard you there again, Pete, reference the kind of outcomes-based thing, and they want to be a flexible outcomes-based regulator. So lots of, walking the talk there, modeling what they want to see, I guess, which is good.
You guys have been living and breathing it, and I know all the work you do. You've certainly educated me in the past around what it means and but it's actually sounds positive. Some of my background was financial services, and we certainly didn't have this view of the FCA then. It was fear-based,
Yeah.
more than anything. So it's really encouraging actually to hear what you're saying. You started, Helen, with this kind of the phrase around making sure that all of the diverse groups that make up customer bases, make up us customers, are very much being included in this. And Pete, you mentioned vulnerability. Now, I know, and anyone that's been through any of your training or seen any of the stuff that you guys do, that this is an area of expertise. Have you seen a change in, or have you had to change how you do any of your training, or is vulnerability got more focus now than prior to that, when this came in a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of changing, this is not new news for us in terms
Mm.
of customer centricity and focusing what is the need associated with the vulnerability and meeting those needs, and taking a very individualized approach. But of course that's quite nuanced in itself, and it almost speaks to a whole range of things that need to be in place for that to happen. So I think this new focus on, well, is it new, the prevailing focus on a kind of service mindset over that transactional approach is kind of music to our ears. We know that there's still inconsistencies around taking a service approach in different customer groups, for example, particularly vulnerable customers. And so we want to make sure that we are really understanding those needs and maybe looking at our data a bit differently as well, and thinking about, segmenting rather on basis of need, rather than just that socio-demographic kind of data that we might have historically been tempted to do. I keep thinking about that meme. It did the rounds on LinkedIn and Twitter a couple of years ago. It was at the time Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, and there was this like spooky alignment in it was like both born in the same year, raised in the UK, both had two marriages, both live in a castle, both rich, famous, whatever. And it was really funny, but it also called out this really key point around the use of personas and how we design our services and our interactions. It shouldn't really be about demographics. It should be about the problems and the challenges that our customers facing at an individual level, and the challenges they bring to us, and about how we help them to solve those problems and kind of meet the needs and the communication needs, and guide them towards however we can, giving them all the information they need to essentially make an informed decision, whatever that looks like for them, and therefore delivering a good outcome. Even if they're not completely satisfied. That's the thing. It's about doing everything we can within our remit and our power. But like I said right at the top of this little, kind of spiel, I'm firmly on my soapbox now. There are a lot of dependencies to getting that right. So definitely, to your earlier point, MT, or your earlier question, the shift towards inquiries around vulnerability and the appetite to then kind of convert those into programs for change. We've definitely seen a continued uptick. So this started really, back in 2021, 2022, probably born by the pandemic. And then as the consumer duty came into focus, certainly in financial services, we've seen a lot more from those clients, lots of inquiries and opportunities to work with both frontline teams, but also other teams. And yeah, the answer ultimately is yes, we're seeing a shift, but it's not a shift so much in our own ethos and attitude about knowing what needs to be done. MT, you know what we do well enough to know the human element is something that we will continuously talk about. Tech being an enabler and not a silver bullet, and really the human side of working with vulnerable customers, and recognizing that vulnerability is affecting all of us, is not going to go away until we literally have everything done by bots, and bots are interacting with bots on our behalf all the time. I think, at the point where you need to speak to an organization about something emotionally loaded or problematic or complex or gnarly, you want to speak to not just a human, but a human that really is able to empathize with you and be that empathetic problem solver. Sorry for that long-winded speech, but yeah,
No, it's great. I love it when you were on the soapbox.
I'll kick it away now and shut up.
I always have, and you're dead right. I think someone we all know and have enjoyed working with. I'm sure Andrew will say that it probably was something like 2014, 2015. He first wrote about the human element, and I guess now even more so, that's even more important. And Pete, you mentioned something earlier, a phrase that I very rarely hear, but I love, which was that kind of, did you say digitally illiterate?
I did say yes, that.
Not like that.
No,
I said, I'm not going to try it because I'll do the same. But yes, absolutely, and that's just one facet of vulnerability that we're seeing evidence surfaced a lot more. So there's a significant number of different vulnerabilities that I think a lot of people, to pick on a point that Helen made there, a lot of people, if we kind of looked from a top-down view at an organization and went, is this a good enough experience for our customers, especially in moments of vulnerability, especially when they need a helping hand, especially when tech's taken away all of the kind of the mundane and repetition, repetitious activity, and what's left is the gnarly, the weird, the corner cases, the high emotion. Have we actually done enough to help not just the technologically illiterate? There we go. I had a crack at it. Have we done enough to help them, and all the other kind of various types and spheres and gamuts of possibility around vulnerability and the extra support that our customers need? And to your point, have we seen an uptick? Yes. Is it enough? From my perspective, absolutely not. I would just stick that out there, flag in the ground almost. In the last few years, we've seen so much spent on technology, right? AI, again, it's everywhere, it's everything, it's taking over how we interact with each other, how we interact in social media, how the clickbait headlines and whatever is presented to us by the mainstream media. When it comes to a customer experience, if you're taking away all of these big things, and what's left is the unusual, the gnarly, the high emotionally charged thing, we haven't done anywhere near enough to support our frontline operations in being able to manage that appropriately and effectively. Right? So as a customer, looking at that, I would say, well, you can look at these huge logos, these huge multinational companies, and they're making billions and billions of profit. But I feel almost upset as a consumer for the people on the other end of it when I step back and reflect on it, because those employees, those agents, those advisors, whichever language you want to use, they need support too to be able to respond appropriately to those situations. And more tech, right now, I don't think it's the answer, and I don't think customers generally, with all the research we're seeing, think it's the answer too. Tech is one of the key areas that in the Forrester report, in the Smart Money People report, everyone is talking about one of the biggest concern drivers for customers, dissatisfaction drivers as well, is that they can't talk to a person. So it's not just the technologically illiterate, it's all of our customers, whether they're vulnerable or not.
There's something about the use of the word illiterate that it's just giving me a little bump. I don't know. I mean it's one of the characteristics of the drivers of vulnerability is around capability, and I think we've just all got various levels of capability. But there can be, I mean, Pete, you say digital isolation sometimes, and I think that's really important to know. There are some people that are excluded from the digital world for a variety of reasons. It could simply be they can't afford a device, they can't afford the data to then get access to the internet, or it could be these issues of kind of like I can't physically, I can't navigate getting online well, or potentially there could be a variety of reasons why someone else could have set us up with a product or a service that we then can't, well-meaning, but then we can't manage on our own afterwards. So just wanted to bring out, again, just listening to you there's so much nuance in this, and it's something about illiteracy, mate. It's got a bit of a negative connotation for me, and I appreciate that's not where it came from, but it's that understanding of the depth and the breadth here, the nuance in the drivers and the characteristics of the ways that we can be vulnerable to harm. But you're totally right. I mean, what is it? 47% of consumers have got at least one characteristic of vulnerability, according to the FCA. And I found it really interesting that Sheldon Mills said in that recent webinar that as long as like loads of frog analogies as well as those. I mean, yeah, lots about frogs. I learned things about frogs. I don't know if you did, if you listened to it, but anyway, it also pulled out exactly the same number, that same stat of consumers using a digital wallet in 2022. So 47%. So 47% of consumers have at least one characteristic of vulnerability, and that same amount has probably gone up since that research, are using digital wallets. Then that feels mildly pretentious to me. You know, there's something in that people are engaging. So they're not completely illiterate, they're engaging, but are they then going to encounter problems and face further exclusion, or be subject to those poorer outcomes that we're all trying desperately to avoid? A bit of a ramble there, but I think, yeah.
You would like to think, given the more positive summary you've given of how the FCA are approaching this, that it seems to me, just with those stats you shared, and Pete, your comments on this, that I would agree with, that part of their role then is to make sure that people are not being left behind, because
Absolutely.
it's dizzyingly complex right now. I mean, again, thanks to you two, I've understood that, you know what, you can dip into vulnerability. I can think about personal experiences where, through time pressure and anything that's financial, then having to engage with a company, and you've got a plethora of ways to do it, and you're sent different places, and you know, you kind of go through that maze, right? Because you know you've got to get this thing sorted out. And as I've been going through it, I've been thinking, I'd like to think I'm sort of middle of the road. I'm okay.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
God, this must be so
Confusing,
stressful for somebody who hasn't got the time that I have. You know, that this is whether they have their electricity on or not. You know, there's some real kind of moments there where you find yourself going, I'm finding this a struggle. And if I'm finding it a struggle, and I'm able-bodied and all these other things, any one of those factors is going to have an even more a more significant impact for somebody who is quote unquote vulnerable. And you just
exactly
think,
right.
what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly right. We know that, you know, people with characteristics of vulnerability are more likely to experience harm as a result of interacting with our organisations. Sadly, it's rarely inevitable, though. That's the lovely bit. And the thing about the fact it's rarely inevitable is that means that we need the foresight to design our products, our services, our journeys, you know, align our processes and procedures with the extremes of accessibility. So when we design for everybody, it's more inclusive. You know, the people in the middle don't really, to your point, feel the difference. You know, they don't feel that the kind of the level of ease, but those people on the peripheries of it really do feel the benefits of more inclusive design, more accessible design. And when we think that way, we can make things better for everybody. We're back to, I know, Martin, we've talked about this before, but the vulnerability kind of test, the why don't we do this for everybody test. Like, you know, we do all of these things like this magic button we press when vulnerability or vulnerable circumstances are present, but why don't we just make that the norm? And that's kind of, we're going right back to what we spoke about at the top of the conversation, this idea of taking that holistic approach and how valuable it is for everybody, and not just those that really need it in the moment and need it. It works for everyone better.
Absolutely.
I love that phrase, and you guys must, you know, designing your processes for the extremes to include everyone, I think is great. And it prompts me to ask you, you know, if people come to you and they say we need help with our people, so we want them to be upskilled and to be able to deliver excellent customer service, especially to some vulnerable groups, and we want to understand what that means better. How often, though, do you then start talking to them about their processes? And, you know, because you can have really skilled people, but if their processes actually work against them and their customers.
Yep. Yeah. So a bad
Pretty
process.
inevitable, isn't it?
Sorry, go for it, Pete.
I was just going to say it's pretty inevitable in most of the scenarios that we start those kind of discussions that we end up kind of expanding the scope out and saying, it's great that you've invested in your people, but if they're more inclined to break a principle of good service over a rule that's prescribed in a process that's put in front of them, then you're always going to have a gap between what you want and what's delivered.
Yeah, we always say a bad process will beat a good advisor every time. And in pretty much any training that we run with frontline team members, they know in intimate detail all the ways that their processes and procedures get in the way of delivering for their customers, and whether they need to make a compromise, and just what that looks like. But ultimately, if we don't understand our customers' needs, then we're going to really not be delivering in our service. So we've got to design and optimize for those needs for a true service-led culture. So, make sure that we are, thinking about our comms and make sure that they are, digestible and understandable, and that our products and our services really, really do meet needs as well. And in order to do that, we need to leverage this kind of weapon, if you can, don't want to use that kind of language, which is our frontline teams, the people who know what's tripping our customers up, and making sure that they are not only empowered to say if they've made some kind of adjustment that's helped a customer, but also to identify, hey, this isn't working for people, and let them know that not only do they have a voice, but that voice is being listened to. So there is a bit of infrastructure and a bit of work that's needed to be done. You can't just encourage people to, open that virtual suggestion box and then nobody hears anything and people get kind of disillusioned and disempowered and stop contributing. Yeah, I can't be succinct today. Apologies for that.
Well, you know me and Pete, we'll quite happily listen because
you're an expert.
Yeah, you're an expert, and it's very insightful. And I know you guys offer this holistic view of like, let's bring all of this together, a part of which will be your people, but let's also look at the whole customer journey, from maybe it's from your website, maybe then it's how and Pete, you mentioned something earlier around this kind of omni-channel, which I truly believe, and maybe I'm being naive, when this was first, this was going to be, we'll give customers more choice and it's going to be good for customers. It came from a good place, but actually now sometimes it's let's divert customers away, let's make it easier.
Yes, and for me, mate, I would disagree with that. I think because I think in too many instances, in the majority of instances, whilst there was a level of, oh, this will help our customers, what they actually meant was, this will help our bank balance, this will help our cost to serve, this will help our margins, this will help reduce bums on seats costs. Because for the longest time, a contact center has been a cost center. And that's just a painful reality of how that's been looked at for a long time, way back when they were still call centers. And a decade ago, a phrase that I was using almost on repeat, and thankfully I don't have to anymore because tech has caught up and surpassed in this space, is the only person who listens to every single interaction that your customers take is the advisor on the other end of it, as a collective kind of gestalt view of what's happening. Now, of course, with analytics, and especially with AI in kind of helping speed these processes up, you can listen to everything. You can look at every single channel going, but there's still the disconnect there. Picking up on a point you made, that part of it is around your people. Now, to me, people are it. Okay, so when you ask your people who know what's going on, what your customers are talking about, you get the qualitative view of, well, why are customers talking about it? Where's their pain points? Where's those moments of truth in those customer journeys? You don't want to map a customer journey about which widgets and digits happen in a system. It's about what's happening for that customer. Like a true customer journey map, to me, shouldn't be about a SAP screen or a Salesforce screen or whatever. It should be about what's happening with that customer in that moment in time. What's the impact of it? And I would say with AI as well, it can be a great chatbot if you put the right guidelines and guide rails in place. But start with, what are our customers talking about? What's their pain points? How can we interface with them in a way that reduces confusion from the get-go, right? So if you know your customers have real issues interfacing from the digital isolation perspective, then start with a bot that says, you know, these are the different ways you can interact with us. Yeah, but that's still starting with the bot. So start with a paper message, start with a text message, start with, you know what, next time someone's out knocking on their door to do a meter read or such, they're actually telling them face to face. You have to find different ways to bridge that first gap before you even get to the point of a bot that says, here's different ways that I can help you. You know, if it doesn't make sense, let me know. But we just seem to have missed that first crucial step, which is ensuring that everyone has fair and equitable, effective access to the services of the companies that they need to interface with. Because it's not about want sometimes, right? They're not always buying sexy products like the latest iPhone or whatever. It's sometimes there's a bit
Very dry,
right? And
boring
it's
products.
much bigger than it should have been, or they've got something, you know, there's a letter from the council, you know, or whatever it might be, and it's putting those barriers that causes that kind of extra mental load in the way before they can even talk to your brand. AI is not solving that. So the people are the solution there. They're the main part to me, not, you know, I'm gonna stop waffling now, but yeah, focus on the people.
But so from what you've both said, if you know, we mentioned at the outset around you've been immersed in this. I'm sort of I was a bit laissez-faire at the front, about a year. So you guys have been immersed in it. And those, you mentioned those kind of processes designed to be truly accessible, accessibility for everyone, right? Design your processes to the extreme. You've just talked then about putting your people at the heart of everything you're doing, but not just, but hearing from them about how the processes can be improved and what are some of the back doors that they maybe have to take that shouldn't be back doors, right? Because I think we've all been there. We've all been operators, right? And you have a black market handbook where the experienced people tell you, no, don't do that. Here's an easier way, and you just go, oh, great. And no, the higher ups don't even know it exists. So when you think, from what you've seen, and that can be your clients you're working with, or just the fact that you're within your network talking about this, for those that have, I don't want to say implemented, is there a better word for those that are riding the crest of this wave quite happily on their surfboards? What are they doing well? What have you helped them do well? Is it those types of things that you've been talking about? Or have they kind of said, right, this is a project, this is what we're going to do?
I
We're
think
going to use this as an opportunity to assess everything.
I'm going to take quite a narrow view here because I'm a nerd and this is my
Nice.
passion. But I'm gonna put the my training hat on, and just say, you know, that we are seeing people that have done all of that, you know, preparedness training prior to the duty going live, you know, putting everyone on the front line through what is the duty, you know, what are the outcomes, and then how does this practically translate to how we can then guide our customers to good outcomes, particularly when vulnerability is present as well. So, you know, that's really unpacking not just that top line definition of vulnerability and, you know, the ways people can be vulnerable, but then really surfacing, well, what do we already know about vulnerability? Where are our gaps? And crucially, to use that same kind of framework as earlier. So we've got the what, we've got the so what, definitely, the impacts, the potential impacts, you know, what does the harm and the detriment really mean and how does it show up? But also the now what are we going to do? What will be different? And part of that is, again, that commitment to then, you know, go and find and iron out the issues in those journeys, and but also that commitment to really changing things by leaning in more, not kind of shying away when somebody's in a tricky circumstance. Part of that is a huge focus on how we effectively position signposting. You know, how do we, because it's one thing to give people in your team a list of, you know, you can Signpost to Mind or the Samaritans or, you know, whoever it might be. But it's very different to then work with them to let them know how to normalize signposting, how to really encourage their customers to actually take them up on it, you know, how to let them know that we matter, that they matter and we care. And then what we find after that is our team members are left feeling more empowered, a bit better at the end of the day. They feel that they know they've had the training and they're equipped to basically lean in more, do the right thing more often, and know that they did the best within their scope of support, within their remit to help those customers in their time of need. So, you know, I just also want to point out, and I'm sorry to go on and on, but in all of our training on vulnerability, we always have to acknowledge, you know, I've just been talking about signposting in quite a like high level casual way, but you know, vicarious trauma is real, you know, and everything that our team members are hearing from our customers is they're not robots. And so we've got to acknowledge that not only are they going to be dealing with their own challenging circumstances, but it's a lot to listen to and to come alongside and to be with and to, you know, deeply listen and to ask good questions and to, you know, effectively signpost and to let that customer know that someone is listening that cares, all within, as I mentioned, that scope of support where we're not a trained listening service. We're not, you know, counsellors, doctors, lawyers, politicians. So we will always, and more we're seeing a willingness to your question, your initial question, MT, about what's different. We're seeing more of a willingness to recognise that in the organisations that we're working with, and you know, we're just exploring really practical ways that we can improve our well-being and our resilience in role, and also just have that kind of common language to debrief more after we've had a challenging contact or a difficult call, and make sure that we've done that in quote unquote peacetime. So we've had these conversations in peacetime, so we know that when it matters, we'll be equipped. Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Thank you. Just to go on and on. To your point, or rather to your question around, you know, what are we seeing in the firms that are doing it well that we work with? I'm seeing you know, that frontline first pass piece is now well and truly in the rearview mirror. That's a given now that we understand the ways that people can be vulnerable and the ways that we can show up. We're seeing a real appetite now to say, what else can we do? How can we support our customers who are experiencing tricky circumstances in even better ways? And that's great. We've done some really good tailored workshops recently that are, you know, absolutely next level when it comes to vulnerability. It's just lovely to see the willingness to engage and to just level up our response, because there's always more we can do and learn, and yeah, that's lovely to see.
I have to say, I find that really, really encouraging and positive. It was many, many moons ago, but I worked as an agent in arrears, you know, for one of the major banks at the time. And you're dead right in that there is an impact of dealing with that and hearing customers, and especially if you're empathetic, which you want to be. You know, the end of a shift, end of a week, you were done. You know, I say, I don't want to talk for everyone, but I know from my own personal experience, it was really challenging. And I had good managers, but it would not have crossed their mind to think about the impact those calls were having on me, because everyone was focused on how many calls you were taking, what plans you'd put in place to help customers. It wasn't just about recovering debt; it was to help customers, and you know. But ultimately, that is sorting out the books. But at no point would there have been, do you think maybe they're taking too many calls, and how can we make sure that we're giving them tools and intervening and checking their well-being? And none of that. It wasn't even discussed anywhere. To hear this now and what you're talking about now is a really beautiful reminder of our involvement, you know.
Agreed.
It's been a huge, I think it's been a huge challenge, but it's a huge positive challenge, I think, for those willing to take it on. As you say, then the shift hasn't just impacted on the frontline advisors, but it's their managers all the way up almost to senior leadership who are focused on customer contact, because as that kind of requirement and expectation has expanded, shifted, mutated, it can't be that the advisors get trained on more emotional intelligence and resilience and better ways of spotting, supporting, effective processing of vulnerability, because when they step back and we ask to find that space for grace for them to be able to stop, reflect, rebuild their resilience, well, if their team leaders haven't been trained effectively, they don't know how to best support them, and in turn that trauma passes on, and so it really needs to be about investment of everyone within that chain, and that investment is a key way of just kind of ensuring that the shifts that are demanded by the customer in response to everything that we're going through, the outcome is not empathy fatigue, it's empowerment and it's enablement, and it's a really good, keen understanding of operations and the value that they can bring to your business and to your customer. And if you follow it like that, I try and put a CFO type hat on, like you said earlier, there's always money when you're about to get fined, right? There's always money when you've been externally audited and everything's coloured in red. But prior to that, it's not necessarily something that gets put at the top of the list of the to-dos. It's let's answer the phone calls, as opposed to let's develop and coach and train and really empower our frontline operations, until suddenly sometimes it's too late. So yeah, we've moved a long way, and we continue to move, but to my mind there's a lot more that can be done.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because hearing you both talk, and just to wind back to you, MT, what you were saying about your managers just wouldn't have countenanced it or even considered it. Like how your well-being, ultimately, that's what we're talking about, at the expense of what's the AHT, what are the other KPIs that we're trying to hit. That's moved on, and that's not the consumer duty. That's just, I think, where we are as a planet, and that has to be a good thing, right? That there's a more open acknowledgement around mental health and well-being and all the things that we might need as humans to thrive in a working environment. But to Pete's point, there's more to be done, definitely. But some great green shoots, should we call them? And some organisations are absolutely nailing this, I think, aren't they? In all different kind of industries. And then we all have our common thread of customer contact as well.
And that's an interesting point, because I was going to ask you before we summarise, really, is it still true? It used to be that the FCA, as a regulatory body, where they're sort of where they were heading, you'd often see other regulatory bodies kind of following, maybe not following, that might be unfair, but they would be aligning around some of the things. Are you seeing that with this?
It just generally, I think that there is a willingness and a want, and I think it's a good thing for regulators to be more aligned. And so if we see good practice in one industry, why shouldn't that feed out to other industries? And similarly, with the FCA, when they make a recommendation to one sector within the industry, what we do see is that that tends to become kind of their expectation for other areas as well. So I think that has to be a good thing, particularly when it comes to the fair treatment of our most vulnerable consumers as well. It has to be good. And I mean, the ideal is that we're all doing this so well, and we're all kind of having this inclusive design, and we all know how to show up with empathy and seek good outcomes for people, that we can all pack up shop and go home, really. But we'll see where we go.
I would add to that, picking up on your point about following. I'm more controversial, I guess. I think they are following. I think it's quite reactive still in for some industry regulators. It'd be remiss of us to not call out some of the headlines that we've seen out there in the world around utilities. But we're starting to see movement. So my challenge would almost be, come on, let's not wait for the FCA to stick a flag in the ground. How about you guys start to push new and better standards for your customers You know, actually turn up instead of being punitive and compliance focused, be more open, more collaborative, over communicate demands and requirements, and actually start to build that rapport with the companies that you regulate, and tell us what good looks like, right? And as opposed to just going, that looks pretty good. We should have a bit of that, you know, because I think we see that too much still, you know, and if the FCA are the front end of the comet, then everything that's trailing behind it means that there's detriment at every point until people catch up to what's been, you know, been set as a standard of what good looks like.
I love it. And this, you can see why I enjoyed working with Pete and Helen so much, because it was
Fun at parties.
these conversations were had very, very often. And believe me, maybe we'll do it one day. If we add alcohol into the mix, then they get even more fun. But for people, you guys, I know, truly believe in what you do, and you come full guns blazing to work with clients and really kind of, again, do all the things that you've spoken about here. Where can people find you, and how can they engage with you? Will you be at events soon, or should they just contact you on LinkedIn, go to the website? Or all of the above?
All of the above. Yeah. So at we're at the CCMA conference, which is October. I say start of October. But generally, yeah, you know, you'll find us regularly talking about this stuff on LinkedIn. Helen continues a kind of magical mystery tour around the UK, delivering this training to the more forward-thinking companies who are investing in this. And essentially, if you want a bit of that, you better get in soon, because you know a diary's filling up. But yeah, LinkedIn. You know, drop us a message if you just want to have a chat. We're not there to just sell. Well, I am more than Helen. Let's be completely transparent about that. I'm very happy with my sales hat on how many people are buying these training products, because you know, not just from a moral standpoint of it's important, but it's making us money. Thanks very much. But you know, you can find us anywhere essentially, and we love to chat like this about just about anything and everything contact center related. You know, so it'd be great for anyone who's got either, you know, a view that aligns, or a view that challenges our thinking, because that's the most important thing. We want to collaborate and improve our kind of shared understanding and how we as an industry approach these challenges.
Mm. And Helen, is there going to be a tour t-shirt?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm working. No, no, there absolutely won't be.
You know, that many locations, it's more like a long dress.
Yeah, a cloak of many, many locations. Yeah.
But I know you guys believe in what you do, and it's a pleasure to do this and talk to you again. And I invite anyone listening to get to know Helen and Pete, because you'll benefit from it, and I know from first-hand experience. Thank you both for coming on.
Cheers, MT. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Pleasure as always. Yeah.